This is Mark McNeese, and you're listening to One Thing or Another, interviews and conversations. Welcome to the podcast. This is your host, Mark McNeese here, and I'm glad to be back after a little bit of an absence, not too long, but today my guest, as I return to the show, is Amy Simon. Amy's the president of LGBT Senior Housing and Care and the founding director of our program. Amy's the president of A. Simon Says, LLC, a women's business enterprise, public and community relations firm founded in 2003. A. Simon Says specializes in public relations, advocacy, policy initiatives, and reputation management for agencies, small business, not-for-profits, healthcare, manufacturing, service industries, and the arts. You can learn more about that at asimonsays.com, and I will ask Amy to repeat these URLs and contacts at the end of the conversation. But Amy, how are you?
I'm great, thank you, and thank you for inviting me to your program, Mark.
Absolutely. I stumble upon a lot of things on the internet because I'm always looking for not necessarily content for LGBTsenior.com, but alerts. I have news alerts and what's going on out there, especially for the elder community, more specifically for the LGBTQ community. And that's how I found LGBT Senior Housing and Care. Can you give us both a little bit of information about you, Amy Simon, and what it is that you do with A. Simon Says and how that leads into the housing?
Yes, absolutely. I'm a cis ally, Jewish American mother in northern New Jersey, and through my work as A. Simon Says, I did a lot of policy initiatives, legislative initiatives, and work in the long-term health care space. So I have substantial experience both with the administrative side of long-term care for older adults and relationships being on site, experiencing direct care of long-term care adults. And through my work as a public relations professional and a communications manager, I became very interested in the LGBTQ community. I've always been an ally. I have a theater background in New York, so I came up with a lot of loved ones and friends and colleagues from the community and supported my friends through the AIDS crisis in the 80s and lost a lot of people, so the community has always been very important to me. So my two interests melded together at that time.
And how did you more specifically become interested in and get involved in LGBT seniors and housing?
It is a really interesting one of those life kismet sort of experiences. I was working for a client in northern New Jersey, a long-term care facility, who had a very progressive executive director, and she had been interested in serving her clients, her residents at her community. There were a couple of residents she felt were perhaps in the closet. And she decided to take the SAGE Care program. And SAGE is the national organization that advocates for the rights and opportunities of LGBTQ older adults in our country. They do a lot of housing work too, an extraordinary organization. And they had and have a training program in just this area. And this executive director took the training program and had her staff do it in 2015. And then she turned to me as her comms person and said, "Go forth and sell this great program we have." And I asked her, what am I selling? You know, what exactly has changed here in your community that makes it affirming and welcoming for LGBTQ older adult residents and their families? And she had, no specific answer to that question and tasked me with creating a program. So I put together a task force of local advocacy groups, of long-term care providers, other organizations working in this space. And over a year, we did an expo, and we put together a program delving into what active steps does one take after one understands the issues to be affirming and welcoming and provide appropriate care to the LGBTQ older adult community. There had been so much work done with the LGBTQ youth space, which is so important because youth are our next generation of leaders. Youth will change how the whole community is integrated into a more common, a more understandable community in our country. I want to, if I were queen, I'd toss out the word normal. There is no normal. Everything is unique. But based on what we learned from the youth experience, integrating it with what we understand with the needs of the elders and the lifelong trauma that elder LGBTQ persons have in or out of the closet, we were able to come up with some specific programming and protocols. And what was so exciting in being in what I'm now calling the Republic of New Jersey is that under Governor Murphy, who is very supportive of initiatives for the LGBTQ community, we were able to work on legislation that he eventually signed to require training for long-term care providers for their LGBTQ residents. And that's been a very exciting initiative.
In that vein, what are some of the realities that face LGBTQ elders in care and in care facilities and in that whole realm?
Yes, and the care services is expansive. So we not only work with long-term care communities, but all kinds of healthcare and care providers, from home care and hospice to professional services, lawyers, realtors. There is, we believe that equity in care is more valuable than equality in care. And I'm going to preface this by explaining that so many people, good-hearted persons, say, we love everybody and we treat everybody equally. We are not discriminatory. And that's gorgeous. But the fact of the matter is, people need to be cared for and interacted from the place that they come. Equality is not the benchmark of proper care. Person-directed care comes from equity. So understanding a person's cultural, social, sexual, religious, immigration status, language backgrounds at all is very important to providing appropriate care for that person. So the LGBTQ older adult community is very interesting. Older adults can be 50 plus, can be designated by the federal government as 65 plus, can be considered by AARP. I'm sure many of you have gotten your application forms in your late 40s. But each generation has their own life experience and their own traumas with the fluidity of legislation, rules, regulations in this country. So the older adults we're seeing in care right now are 75 plus. And they have come in with an incredible amount of trauma within the community, really defined clearly by the otherness of being LGBTQ, by the legality of rights of marriage and children and employment and housing and assembly through the generations. They are more infirm. when you go into care, as most seniors are now. They enter into the care services with all of the same concerns and fear and trauma of any older adult, and add on that decades of discrimination, bias, lack of opportunities to create family structures, being excluded from their churches or their other houses of worship and their families, oftentimes, and having survived an AIDS epidemic where they've lost so many of their loved ones and friends. And right now, the trauma of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
which has raised a lot of post-traumatic stress responses from the time of AIDS. Their disparities and their fear of going into care is, tenfold, a hundredfold of physical abuse, of lack of equal care, of lack of understanding. Oftentimes, our elders go back into the closet if they've even come out when they go into the care system, whether they're receiving home care or in a facility, because
Mm-hmm.
they're afraid of being abused. They're afraid of being discriminated. It causes a lot of issues for both the client and the caregiver.
And what kind of reception and or obstacles and resistance, I don't know if there is any, do you face when you're in terms of training professionals? Do you reach out to facilities and professionals, or do they seek you out? And what kind of reception do you get?
That's an interesting question, Mark. In the Republic of New Jersey, now we have legislation that requires long-term communities to do this training. So whether they want to or not,
Mm-hmm.
it's a requirement for them to be certified by the health department. So, and they're used to a number of different requirements. What has become interesting for them is that the legislation is written in such a way that it takes about 6 hours of live training to go over all of the different elements required in the legislation. That's a little bit challenging, but it's also fabulous for us because it is exactly what's needed to understand the issues and the changes that you need to implement. So in New Jersey, long-term care communities are resolved to do this
Mm-hmm.
education. But other care providers and service providers need to be convinced of the market.
Mm-hmm.
It's a business strategy. It's
Yeah.
positioning. And in New Jersey, in different counties in New Jersey, we have, fairly significant levels of LGBTQ persons in the community. And, LGBTQ plus is a huge community, but not just one community. Every letter in the acronym is its own community unto itself. So equitable care not only needs to be taught when we, generalize, but needs to be understood how it affects each different community within the acronym. And that is an eye opener
Mm-hmm.
for everyone who we teach. So we do have to, what I call, make the case. And only 3 states in the country, California, Massachusetts, and New Jersey, have specific legislation geared to the LGBTQ elder, specifically in housing and care areas. So the move is on, and organizations like SAGE are leaders in the advocacy for encouraging other states to legislate some of this work. It's challenging. Only half the states in the country have anti-discrimination policies that
Mm-hmm.
include the LGBTQ community. And luckily, with the Biden administration, who's also pro-equitable rights for everyone, they've been doing a significant amount of work overturning the last administration's bans and changes and reenacting anti-discrimination policies that include policies for sexual orientation, gender identity, all of the SOGI elements.
Yeah, I felt like I was a little bit in the desert there for a few years because I had asked you in an email about the LGBT Elder Housing Summit that the Obama administration held. I somehow got invited to that, and it was a highlight for me. But after that during the last administration, I thought we're not going to see anything like that again. But maybe hopefully with Biden, and things will turn around at least temporarily. We're going to see.
Well, that's the challenge. That is the challenge, Mark. That's a challenge for you, for everyone in the community, and that's the experience of our elders, right? Every administration has new regulation and rules. Every state has their own regulations and rules, even, down to counties and municipalities. And at the end of the day, it's what happens in front of the Supreme Court that memorializes how we treat others and how we treat the LGBTQ community and what's available to them. And so the trauma that the community has, especially elder community, I call the ping pong ball of rights and legislation. Members of the community, have fear that, their families are, will I be able to keep my children if I move to another state? Will I be able to still be married or get married? Or so, there's so many elements to the legality of being an LGBTQ community member that create such incredible stress and anxiety for the community. And with a 9-3 split in the Supreme Court now towards conservative, it is more frightening than ever, although we've seen some rulings that give us a little bit of hope constitutionally. But the fight is on, the fight continues, and we want our young people to be a part of that journey. Our elders have fought for a long time or hidden for a long time, and we want them to have a safe, affirming place to rest as they age, and provide them with the support, the services, the care, and the grace that they deserve.
Before I wrap up with a final question, you mentioned the acronym, and there's a paragraph on the site for LGBT elder housing about the word queer, and I was fascinated that it's there, and I was glad that it was there, because even with my site, LGBT Senior, it started 10 years ago, and the Q letter was not really, widely part of the acronym then. It is now. Now you see it everywhere. But the paragraph specifically addresses the why it's not in your organization's name, and it just has to do with the fact that especially older LGBT people, we have a history of the word queer that can be very painful and triggering and unpleasant, and I have felt that way myself. I have accepted it. I use it now. Really, it's situational for me. But I completely understand, because I was called that, and it was not a compliment, when I was growing up. So it is a thing for a lot of elders, especially. So I just wanted to bring that up, because I was happy to see that. And it has nothing to do with rejecting the word queer. It has to do with being sensitive to who your constituents are.
Absolutely. The word queer was used as a form of aggression and abuse towards the community for so long. But like so many of these terms, the young people are taking it back and using it as a form of empowerment. So, and queer, the term has become the overriding term to identify the whole community, where once the term gay was.
Yeah.
So it's like giving gay back to menfolk and
Yeah.
giving, using queer instead. But yes, our elders it can still be triggering. And so we advise our clients who we train who work with elders to not use that term, even if it's used with them, and to understand its use. But this work is going to be around for generations. And I like to think every decade the needs of the elders will change as the elders change. But really, in this fast paced world, every 5 years, we need to look at who our elders are and understand how they are embracing terminology, what their family structures are, what their legislative opportunities are, and realign our training and our programs to meet that group of elders from whence they come.
Amy, it's been a really, really nice to talk to you. I've enjoyed what you've had to say and what you represent and what you're attempting to accomplish. Tell people how they can find LGBT senior housing and care, and where to turn to if they want more information.
You can find us at www.lgbtseniorhousingandcare.com. It's all spelled out. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, and we have a full line of online trainings available. Our same name, LGBT Senior Housing and Care.teachable.com. And I can be reached at any time at info@LGBT Senior Housing and Care if anyone wants more info about us and what we do. It's been such a pleasure talking with you, Mark. I'm really, really pleased you reached out, and I really appreciate the work you're doing in the space, communicating the issues and speaking to people in the field. It's really valuable for all of us.
Thank you so very much, and I'm sure our paths will cross again. I'll send you this podcast when it's up, and there we go.
Thank you so much.
Have a good New Jersey day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.